does that mean her abdomen is more valuable than my abdomen? No, we're equal in value, but distinct in roles. The same thing, chemically or physically or spiritually, all of those truths flow in the same direction. We're chemically different, we're physically different, and so we have equal value but distinct roles. And so when you know your role and you know your value at the same time, then this whole idea of submission and it doesn't get as dark, because it's not one person submitting to another because we're unequal. Again, Doriana talked about that submission of equals. It's not, she submits to me because I'm smarter. Absolutely not. That's not the case.
Phenomenal followers, friends, and family.
Welcome back to Young Black Married Christian Podcast.
We know you fall into one of those categories. You may fall into some of those categories, but even if you fall into none of those categories, we promise you that over the next few minutes, we'll give you 4 to 5 tips to fortify the future of your marriage.
Now listen, we know you're short on time. We know you're short on data, but do us a favor. If you can't make it all the way through the podcast, click the download button attached to the podcast and take us with you throughout your day.
There's a lot to get into, but we are going to do it for you.
We are your hosts, LaShad and Doriana James, from all the way down in San Antonio, Texas, working hard to make sure your spouse doesn't become one of your exes.
Let's get started.
So before we get started here, I definitely want to give a shout out to some of our new Phenomenal fans and Phenomenal family. Yes, if I mess your name up, please forgive me. Please forgive me. I'm terrible at pronouncing names. Doriana, tell them. Okay, help me. Correct me if this looks wrong. Javaris Carrion, what's up? Kalasia Carrion, what's up? Thank you for joining the Phenomenal family. How do you say the next one, Doriana?
Shaheda Usher.
I love it. Shakira McLean, what's up? Shamika, what's up? Abigail, I know you're out there. What's up to you too as well? Jessica Martinez, hello. Peyton, thank you for joining the Phenomenal family as well. Listen, we don't have time to do all of the shout outs, but I definitely wanted to at least give those new people a shout out and say, hey, welcome to the Phenomenal family. Thank you for your support. And we're back with a really special episode. So today's episode is a joint episode with the podcast called Married, Cultured, and Known. We talked with Oriana and John, who are the host over there. And Doriana, can you share some of your favorite parts of that podcast episode?
So this last episode, I think there's a lot of really good content in there. There's a lot of gems, really good conversation we got to have, both on and off, like the recording time. But my favorite part of the podcast is definitely we get to talk about how men and women are both equal in value, but they're very distinct in roles. So I think one joke that LaShad made, which was really funny to me, was, we both are equal, as humans. We both have the same rights and God-given kind of breath and everything. But no matter how much he feels equal, he won't be able to carry a baby. So we have like distinct roles, distinct functions that are God-given. And we kind of go into that a little bit deeper. And I really enjoyed that part of the podcast.
Yes. So yeah. Equal in value, but distinct in roles. I like that. My favorite part of the podcast is when we talked about how submission to headship or submission to your husband it also puts a burden on the husband to be a good leader. So I look at Jesus Christ. He was always right. In every argument he got in, he was right. And so I think about when I argue with my wife sometimes and I feel like I'm right, how am I going to quote unquote win the argument? Or what does it look like for me to lead my wife well, even when we disagree on things? And sometimes I look at my leadership as a man and it doesn't quite line up with what I see Jesus do in the Bible. I don't see Jesus, getting overly emotional and yelling at his disciples or, being rude or mean or leading them in a very, rough kind of way. And so although he had moments where he was firm, absolutely, he doesn't, it doesn't look like some of the arguments that we may have. And so I have to ask myself, okay, LaShad, if you're the leader and even if you're right, how are you going to lead and how are you going to be right? And so that definitely it's an interesting part of the conversation that you guys are really, really going to enjoy. Before we get into this new content, we have 3 people who left us some amazing customer ratings, and I just love to read them for you. The first one is from Curtis. It says, "This is it. A new husband with always changing military life and a career. This podcast gave me the most helpful character building tools. So thank you. Love the flow. It's relevant. The topics and the pace is easy to keep up with and to take notes. Thank you, Curtis."
Thanks, Curtis.
Oh, that really warms our heart. The second one is from, it looks like Love MZ Brit. And so it says, amazing podcast, especially for Christian couples pursuing a relationship built on a solid foundation.
Yeah.
That's what's up. And then the last one is from, it says Search, I think it says Searchman007. Am I saying that right? Okay. It says, recently gotten married and your podcast has created some stimulating conversation between my wife and I. Definitely helped strengthen us even more. That's what's up. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I love it. So enjoy this episode. I know you're going to have a lot of fun. If you want to connect with us more, there are 3 ways that you can do that. Click the link in our bio and we have a training course that's available for you. We have some premium unreleased episodes that are available for you. And we also have the Creating Your Family Mission and Vision Statement, which is going to take your life to the next level.
Yes.
Those are just 3 ways you can invest inside of your marriage and help us keep this podcast coming to you. And so listen, we love you. Enjoy the podcast and we'll see you on the other side.
Bye.
Welcome back to Re. I'm Oriana, and today we are discussing what happened with Fantasia and her comments on submission. We have some amazing guests today. We have Lashad and Doriana from the Young Black and Married podcast, and we are so excited to have them. Y'all say hi.
What's up, family?
Hello.
What's happening, bro? What's happening?
So glad to have you guys. So, first off, this whole video threw me when I saw it. And I don't watch Breakfast Club on a regular basis, but John sent it to me and was just like, yo, you got to watch this. And I'm looking at this video and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is completely different than what we're used to hearing. Number one, from Fantasia, and number two, just outside of Christian circles, talking about submission and headship and, like biblical principles. And I'm just like, alrighty then. This is different.
Because for y'all who might not be aware, I'm John. I'm here with my wife Oriana. We are Reverentia. And for those of you guys who might not be aware, the Breakfast Club is it's a radio show, secular source there. And Fantasia, who is a popular African American singer, got on there, was recently talking about just her life, what she's been up to, was telling people how she met her now husband. I think they met and dated for 3 weeks, if that.
Yeah, they dated for 3 weeks before they got married.
Yeah.
Ooh, them
and then
Sharon's
was just
crazy.
like, bam, cool, we're going to do this. And I was like, all right. And so, she went on to say, how women need to submit. Some news outlets that I've been seeing were saying that basically women should submit to get a man, or women aren't getting as many good men because they won't submit. And a lot of people had a huge issue just with, the word or title submission in general, and then beyond that with her comments as far as submission goes. So, I definitely wanted to shed some light on what submission is, especially more so in the biblical context, and why it's important, why it's not what the world thinks it is, basically.
Well,
So what were you guys thinking about it?
Well, no, that's a great question, because one thing is, no matter what you think about the word submission, the scripture tells men and women to submit to one another. And I believe, I'm looking it up right now, I believe it's in Ephesians 6, but I'll correct myself in a couple seconds if it's not. But the scripture calls for mutual submission between a man and a woman within a marriage. And so it's not always just the woman submitting to the man. A lot of times it's the man submitting to the woman. A great example of this is in the Old Testament with Abraham. Abraham had a son by the hired hand, and it wasn't really working out too well with his wife, Sarah. And so Sarah said, yo, we need to get rid of this second son, this hired hand. And Abraham went to God, and God ended up telling Abraham, you know what, you need to listen to your wife. And this is the instance where God was specifically saying, you need to listen to what your wife is saying.
Sit down.
So submission, whether you think it's an icky word or whether you think it's a great word, I think a great place to start is the fact that the scripture calls both men and women in a marriage to submit to one another and have something called mutual submission. So I'm looking up that scripture now just to make sure I got the right verse and chapter.
Oh, yeah. And as we think of submission, too, submission of equals, it's the same for Jesus and God the Father. Jesus had to submit to God the Father's will, even though he was just as much God as God was. At the end of the day, he said, your will be done. Does that mean that Jesus was less God than God? No, it's just understanding where our role and how we flow as a team is we both submit to each other in order to make the team work.
Yeah, that's I feel like on a real quick separate subtopic, that's That's so complex. Like God submitting to himself, or God telling himself to submit.
That's Trinity. We're getting off topic.
Just, I had to point that out, but I think that the complexity, just the simple fact that exists, that happened, bro. That's real life, real history. The fact that happened, I think, kind of underlines or underscores how powerful and how important submission is.
Yeah. And I think the reason people had such a big issue with it is because the world system has twisted what submission means. And whenever normal people, like people who are not Christians,
normal people, regular,
we got to be abnormal to love God. Got to be a little different. Whenever normal people hear the word submission in the context of marriage, their first thought is that, okay, that means that I'm the wife and the wife is the only one submitting. And I have, dinner ready at 5 and I'm in a dress and it's like, the 1920s and yes, sir, no, sir. I have your slippers ready and your pipe and whatever. And it's just like, that's not what's happening here. Yeah. That's not what this is at all. But I think a lot of people still have those archaic archetypes stuck in their heads. And so when they hear somebody like Fantasia in 2019 saying, hey, I submitted to this man and this is what happened, it's just like, you crazy. This makes no sense.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with what you're saying, Oriana. By the way, I love your name because we're just one letter away.
One letter away.
We're one letter away.
Bro. I think we were destined to do this, guys.
I think so. I think, did we just become best friends? Like, no.
Right?
Yeah. But I think it is true that we have let the world kind of define what submission is. And we've taken that word and we run with it where, yes, women always get, usually like culturally, women get the word submit. It also means like leaving your brain at the altar, leaving your will and your dreams and the things that you want to accomplish completely at the feet of your husband. He gets to call all the shots and you get no say so. And so whenever we take that, something that God has ordained, and we flip it to what we can like kind of define it as, ultimately there's going to be some mess ups in there, because that's, God never designed submission to mean that you do only what he says, no input, no, not your own brain, not your own will, not your own relationship with God. It all falls on the husband. Not only is that unfair to women, that's actually unfair to men to put all that pressure on your husband.
That's
to be
a lot
like,
of weight.
you do everything.
Oh boy.
Oof, that's a lot of weight as a leader.
Yep.
And I think sometimes we think about the weight that submission would have on women, and we kind of don't focus on sometimes the leadership role, the heavy call that has on men.
Yes.
So it's kind of like a two-sided thing too.
And just to hop in, you mentioned that submission normally has a negative connotation to it. A lot of times when I think of the word submit, I think of either WWE or some sort of mixed martial arts where someone's twisting another person's arm.
It's like, and you have to get down.
Exactly. The ref is looking at the person like, do you submit? Do you submit? And the person's like, no. It has this negative connotation to it, but that's not, we cannot view the word and we can't view scripture through that lens to help to try to use that word submission. And it's the same way with the word slavery for those people who are kind of like, oh, the Bible's kind of icky or has these words in it like slavery, I don't want to read it. We can't view those words like the word slavery in light of what happened in America with slavery. And so we got to go back to go back to what the word actually means and then the context that it's being used, and not try to put words in people's mouths.
Yeah, we don't do that nowadays. We just be like, okay, this is what this means to me, and I'm going to accept that as truth, and I'm just going to take it and run with it.
Well, that's the society we live in. We have this, what is it? Moralistic relativism? Or moral relativism.
Moral relativism.
That's the thought process. That's kind of the
what's true for
the
you,
broken record.
What's true for me is true for me.
That is going on in the last, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years that we've seen that kind of grow and like really take root in our society. And this is what happens when things that are not of God take root in a society. You get a whole bunch of craziness. Yeah. But Fantasia has somehow managed to get in the space where she's just like, you know what? I'm going back to my roots, because she grew up in church. And it's just like, okay, I'm gonna go back to my roots. I'm gonna submit to my husband. And for those of you who are listening and are just like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I understand what we've seen as submission is negative. It's not correct. So what is the actual what's the actual thing that the Bible is saying? Like, tell me exactly what it is it is supposed to be if what I believe it is not true. And 100% honest, and shameless plug, I wrote a book on this. Haha. It's called A Heart of Submission, and you can get it on Amazon. Please do. Anywho,
Shameless plug.
shameless. I have
Go ahead
no
and plug
shame
that book.
whatsoever.
That's a resource. Listen, guys, if
That's
you're
a
listening to this
resource.
podcast right now,
That resource will change your life. You need to go pick it up. She put time and energy into it.
Sure, I did.
You know, don't be stingy. Make that investment into your life and go cop that book.
Yes.
Facts, bro.
And I talk about how to, I go with the overarching idea of submission and how we all submit to God. But in the context of this podcast, talking about how you as a wife or you as a husband submit to one another, it's not stuck in the archetype that we're used to. So in the book, I go through, I believe it's Ephesians 6, and I talk about how we basically have to have that hyper level of communication so that we're not stuck in, oh, well, he said that I have to do this, so I can't say anything. And it's just like, no, have an open conversation, like keep both lanes of communication open so that you're listening and you're talking and you're expressing yourself as well. And that's how you get into a place where you're both submitting to one another and not getting stuck in this thing where it's just like, okay, I have to keep my mouth shut on either side of the aisle for the husband or the wife. Now you, sir, Mr. John, I want you to talk about headship, because that is a whole different bear.
Yeah, I think that it's. I've always thought of submission as like complete trust. You know, if someone were to just be like, "Hey, bro, define submission right now, go," I would say total complete trust. You know, it's more of a thing where you just kind of let yourself, for the sake of this example, you know, just fall off the cliff, close your eyes, and you can, you know, rest in the fact that you're going to be caught. You know, you're going to be rescued. And
I feel like jumping off cliff sometimes. I'm
especially
in marriage.
You don't even give it a second thought, right? And so, in terms of headship, one of the things I've always been really big on is being a leader, initiator, and a cultivator. Like those are like my top three words. You know, I've been saying that since me and Oriana like very, very first started dating. You know, I've always
When I
been
first
like,
met him,
leader,
that was one of the first things that came his mouth.
all of that. Those are the three words I've always just been kind of, you know, stating here and there, you know, off and on. And I stand behind that because that's what my dad has always stood behind. And those three words basically mean I know where I'm going. I know the type of environment that I would like to create and would like to facilitate. And it's kind of like having an idea of the world you would like to see created and really asking your wife, you know, basically, this is the destiny that I would like to step into. You know, do you trust me with this? You know, do you trust your life with this? You know, I've seen other situations where, you know, maybe if it's a commander, you know, leading his troops in the battle, you know, they're trusting him with his plans, his directions, his motions. Like, will you stake your life on this? Do you trust me completely and wholly with this? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, if I believe, you know, marriage is to be the greatest reflection of God's relationship with mankind, you know, as a husband, if you're to be that leader and your wife is to trust you to that extent, you know, just thinking about that on a spiritual level, that's incredibly deep. Mm-hmm. Like that's wild. I'm asking you to trust me with your life. Like, you know, everything that you want to do, everything that I want to do, it's like, all right, I'm putting it together
and make something.
here's the roadmap. You know, here's, you know, maybe each battle. Here's how we're going to attack it. You know, are you down? And to say yes to that, I definitely think that, you know, men and we in terms of headship definitely shouldn't take that lightly. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't think that's that's just flown off the cuff. Like, oh, here's my yes. You can have it. You know, yeah. Like, nah, bro. You know, to me, it's more like, you know, it's in a, like this golden box that you kind of, you know, take the buckle off and you open it up and it's shining like, yes, I entrust you with this. You get what I'm saying? So, headship is really important to me, man. And I always get on my homies about it. You know, if I see them, you know, doing dumb stuff like posting subliminal stuff on Facebook about their wives, like, you know, sharing something like a meme here and there, Dog,
Sneak this in.
that pisses me off, bro.
Sneak this.
That makes me so mad. I'm like, bro, I will find you. I will knock you out in the name of Christ. Like, it makes me so mad, bro. Like, that's to me, that's poor headship. Very, very poor. Like, you got something to say to your wife, say it to her face, bro. Like, go in there, get off face, log off, and go talk to your wife. Because that's how I am. I'm very confrontational. If I got something to say to Oriana, I'll let her know.
Which leads me into my next question. And I want to you don't have to tell me all your business, but I want to get a little personal. What does this look like practically for you guys? Like, how does submission and headship play out in your household? If y'all are comfortable. Oh, Lord.
Oh, it's a battleground. A bunch of explosions and body parts all over. No, I'm joking. Well, no, Fantasia said something in her interview that was actually on point, and she said we're trying to do something that we haven't had modeled for us, and unfortunately, certain people, not making a generalization here, but if you come from a background where your father was either absent father or he was an abusive father or he was in the house and he was just a very passive father, then you step into the Christian walk or you step into trying to live a better life in your marriage, you don't have a good model to follow. And hopefully you have a mentor or something like that. But me and Doriana found ourselves in a place where we were trying to create something that we didn't have a clear day-to-day model to follow. And so how does it look in our life? How does it play itself out in our life? It's going to sound cliche, but it really is a lot of, and I'm not going to use the word trust in God. That's what it is. But I'm praying like, God, I know you've given me a vision for our family, and I need you to help align my heart with my wife's heart. I need you to help me to be a better leader. So maybe if I'm coming on too strong, or maybe if I'm being too reactive instead of proactive, or maybe if I'm not setting the right environment in the home, can you help me be a better leader so that my wife trusts me to follow me? Because when I look at Jesus, he's one of the greatest leaders to ever live. I don't see him being as mean or demanding as sometimes I am. And so for me, it's asking God, one, work on me, that I'm not trying to just drag my wife across the finish line, and that I'm actually being loving and caring. And then from there, my prayer is, God, if I am right about this, could you just show Doriana in a dream? Like, we've had that. Doriana laughing. Oh, no. She's laughing because we were arguing so much. I was like, God, I need you to settle this argument tonight. Like, I'm going to bed. She's going to bed, and you need to give both of us a dream where you wake us up and be like, LaShad is right or Doriana is right. Don't argue about it. Like, so a lot of that I don't recommend that strategy all the time, but a lot of it is like trusting God. And I guess being patient, being patient and giving people time to work out this new way of life that they might not have seen before or been a part of. Go ahead, Doriana. I missed something?
No, I definitely, a lot of times you hear the part of like, okay, you need to know your role and play your role. And a lot of times we let society or like our past maybe relationships we've seen, like our parents, they define the role for us. And I think what's really been good for LaShad and myself is saying that, the world does not get to define our role in our family. We get to choose that. So it's really about LaShad and I coming together and saying, hey, this is the part that I want you to play. Is this something that you can do? Like, we set expectations for each other. Maybe I don't cook. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to expect you to cook. And, the way that my mom did, or the way that we see in like the Brady Bunch or whatever else, this is your role because we talked about it. So LaShad and I get to set the pace and get to set like the rules for our family because we're the ones in it. So I think a lot of our submission has just looked like being communicating with each other, saying, this is really what I expect from you. Is that something that's reasonable? Can you do that? Is that something I need to take on? And vice versa. So that whole idea of knowing your role, it's knowing that you're the one who sets your role. Good. You and your family set the role, not anybody else.
And Fantasia had something she said where I think the host asked her, are men and women equal? And she said, yes, they're equal. And then I think people use that word equality as if it's like a 50-50 split, or if there's some sort of weird, like, I do this, you do that, contractually 50-50 equality split. People, men and women are equal in value, but we do have distinct roles. And we actually have, kind of God-given distinct roles within marriage. There's, no matter how much me and my wife debate about it, I can't carry a child. does that mean her abdomen is more valuable than my abdomen? No, we're equal in value but distinct in roles. The same thing, chemically or physically or spiritually, all of those truths flow in the same direction. We're chemically different, we're physically different, and so we have equal value but distinct roles. And so when you know your role and you know your value at the same time, then this whole idea of submission and it doesn't get as dark, because it's not one person submitting to another because we're unequal. Again, Doriana talked about that submission of equals. It's not, she submits to me because I'm smarter. Absolutely not. That's not the case. It's not. I mean, I'll be 100% honest. Sometimes it's not the smartest idea that wins, but it's the idea that has the most team unity behind it. And so for the sake of unity, sometimes my wife will listen to me because she knows there's more than one way to skin a cat. And so that's what submission looks like in our relationship, because she'll look at me and be like, you know what, we'll do it your way this time. And then next time I look at Doriana and say, you know what, I think your way can work. I think both of our ways can work, but we'll do it your way this time. So that's to answer your question. I think that's how it looks in our marriage.
Yeah, just one more thing I'm gonna pop in. I really like, whenever Lashad and I talk about how men and women are distinctly different, it's the idea that we celebrate those differences. So yes, he has more testosterone, which means he probably wakes up and has a little more energy to be aggressive throughout the day and take what needs to be taken and do what needs to be done. At the same time, I'm a little bit more in tune, like emotionally. It could just be something like hormones, and that idea of the differences are celebrated, and saying that if God put it there, then he must have meant it for a reason. And of course, we probably take it. There might be sin that's mixed in with some of the emotions I felt in the past and blah, blah, blah. But the idea is, if God put it there, that means that it's meant to be used. It's God honoring. And that by making sure that we appreciate those differences, we're not just being like, okay, Lashad doesn't look at me and be like, okay, you need to lift the same weight that I do, because that's not going to happen. And so I celebrate his differences. I celebrate his strength, and he celebrates the delicate areas of my life. Just me being a woman, we're different. And I don't think equality, sometimes men and women, they want to be seen as like women can do just as much as men can. And in some areas, sure. But in other areas, it's like they weren't designed to. So why push it?
Yep. And I love what you just said about celebrating those differences. And now you, sir, I want you to tell them.
Me, sir.
Yes. I want you to tell them the story of a way that we recently started celebrating our differences, like when we changed our workouts.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So we've been trying to get back in shape.
Get back in shape? What you mean? I'm trying to stay in shape. Thank you.
Right, stay in shape.
I was gonna say, yeah, Oriana, you have she already been in shape. She just,
I was just like, correct yourself.
So yeah, my bad. Stay in shape. And I love going to the gym, throw on some weights, run on the treadmill, this, that, and the third. I love it. But Oriana hates it. So she'll go in there, maybe lift a weight, might put a toe on the treadmill and be like, all right, I don't like this. So, and that just didn't that working out that way just didn't translate to her well. And so, instead of trying to get her to be like, hey, this is the only way to work out. If you don't do this, you're just not going to get better. We sat down, we talked about it. I'm like, okay, well, what do you like to do? What physical activity do you like to do that's actually going to, work everything out, legs, arms, abs, whatever it is. And she came up with dancing because she loves to dance, and she has some weights.
Yes.
See?
Yes.
And she
Just Dance 2017. Get that dance pass for like $3.
Wow.
Unlock all the songs and just do a little mini twerk out.
Whoa. That's
Listen, real men dance with their wives. Right? Listen, you heard it here first on this podcast. Real men do dance videos at the house with their wives.
Amen to that.
Apparently, real men twerk with their wives.
Oh my God.
Hashtag that.
Real men twerk with their wives. We need to put that on a t-shirt.
No, bro.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, that was one of the ways that we recently just started celebrating our differences. And I was telling him, because we just started this week, so this is very new.
Mm-hmm.
But I was telling him, I was just like, I really like this. At first I was kind of apprehensive about doing it because his love language is quality time. Mm-hmm. And on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, those are his off days. So in my head, I'm just like, on those days, I want to spend as much time with you as possible. So, you're loved, you're appreciated, all those great things. And getting up and working out together was one of the things that we used to do. And we would get up and go to the gym. And like he said, I might lift a little something.
Yeah, but she wasn't really feeling it.
I wasn't. And I was just like, I'm in more pain than anything else. And I'm not actually enjoying it. And this is just not working.
Yeah.
And so I came back home and I just put on my Spotify. I have my little dance playlist and I just dance to that. And I might lift a little something. Mm-hmm. Like during the beginning, like Proud Mary is one of my favorite songs. I know this is slightly off topic, but Proud Mary by Ike and Tina. I dance to that one. And at the beginning, when they're going really slow, I'll lift my little bit of weights just to tone something. And then I'll put them down and I'll go full Tina. And it's wonderful. My favorite thing to do. Absolutely wonderful. And I don't feel like, I'm away from him and, causing, extra strife in my marriage because we're not together. It's just like, no, he has a way of working out and I have a way of working out. Both of them are good. But like you said, equal, but what was that word you used? I'm sorry.
Distinct.
Yes, equal but distinct.
Distinct, equal in value, but distinct in
there
roles.
We go.
Yeah. And so I think all in all, the gist of that was like, I wanted you to find something that works for you, something that I can hold you accountable to that you like doing, right? Yeah. And so it was, me trusting you with that decision. Mm-hmm. And then, that's something that works for you, works for me, because I'm like, hey, I don't have to wait for you. When we get up there early, we give it like, I give it like 7 a.m., like to go work out and stuff. And she's like, no, I'm asleep. So, having to find something that works out for both of us. So that's good. And, I think kind of going back to the whole, the roles and things of that nature. I know my dad, he's real old school. So, growing up and seeing how he kind of modeled quote unquote submission, it was more so of an iron fist type situation. It's more so like, hey, I'm literally bigger, I'm stronger, I'm louder, my voice is more boisterous. So, if I say, hey boy, sit down, or, where my dinner at, you gonna do what I say you gonna do. And I was like, and just growing up, I'm like, well, hey, that must be what a real man is. Cause if someone mess with me at school, he'll come to school and shut the whole school down. And I'm like, everybody respect it. So that must be what a man is. And
then he married me.
Yeah, it was.
And that didn't
work.
Up
until that point, up until meeting you, I, sat down with, quite a few different other Black male Christians who are older, been married for a very long time. And they was like, listen, little bro, that's not how the game goes.
you ain't going to G-check your wife.
Don't
you ain't going to roll up on her and just be like, yo. Yeah.
My family is from Baltimore. I have cut you blood in my veins. Don't play with me.
It was like, listen here, little bro. That's not how it goes. And so, it was really tough. There was a lot of that I had to undo. From being candid and honest, there's still some remnants of that I still have to undo. There are many times where I feel like, I think through a situation logically, because that's what I do. And I'm like, hey, this makes sense. This works. It's literally the best course of action. So if you do not agree, you're simply wrong, and we should go about it this way. Without even taking into consideration, what she might think, a different avenue she might see to pursue it, working smarter, not harder. I'm just like, oh, I've done the analysis. Boom, let's roll with it. And she like, no. I vote nay. I vote nay.
And I think part of and this is slightly off topic, but part of knowing how to I think part of being a good wife is realizing that your husband is going to have some of those residual either from his upbringing or lack thereof. And sometimes you got to let him fall on his face. You got to let him make a mistake and not rub it in his face and just be like, you know what? I'm going to let you do that. That's what you want to do?
How the old girl say in the war room? Like, duck so God can hit your husband.
Yep, that's exactly what she said.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
So, but here I think here's something that might be really helpful for women is that a lot of men have this drive in them where they're not going to let opposition stop them from achieving goals, which is a good thing. We have this idea that we're going to knock down every barrier that's in our way. Now, where that gets messed up is when you get into a marriage and you begin to see your wife's objections or your wife's hesitance as the enemy, and you think that I'm just going to steamroll over her the same way I steamroll over the objections of my coworkers, or I'm going to steamroll over her the same way I steamroll over the objections of, enemies or whatever it may be. And that's not how it works. And so again, I think we really got to look back at leaders that have been successful in the past. I go to Jesus because he's part of a person I'm studying to be like. And so when I look at Jesus, he was always right about what he said. Like me, I always think I'm right, but maybe I'm like 75% right. I might be
75.
Like I'm a solid 75.
I could be. I always think I'm 100% right, but on a good day, maybe I'm 75% right. Jesus was 100% right about every idea he ever had. Every opinion he had about an idea was always 100% right. Even his throwaway thoughts, his throwaway ideas were centered and balanced and proper, but you never see him being as mean as you see me whenever I'm in an argument. You never see him being as aggressive or prideful as I get whenever I think I know something more than my wife. And so I think, from a business perspective, but especially from a marriage perspective or any sort of leadership perspective, you have to know how to be right, and you have to know how to win a fight, not just, trying to win or trying to be right, but you got to know how to be right.
Yep.
That's true, man. Golly, because I know I can be. I'm rude, man. I'm very rude.
The Lord is yet working on you. It's okay,
man. I just
yet working.
He's yet working.
I just have a history of being an a-hole, like just being honest and blatant. Because I wouldn't say that being honest and being blatant are the same things. They're not. Being honest, I think is almost always coupled with a gentle assertion, and it's tactful. Underlining the gentleness and the tactfulness, right, while not also leaving anything out or omitting anything, right. But being blunt while you get the truth across, it almost always comes off as harsh. You just kind of throwing it out there like you throwing some food out to a dog or whatever, And so, I have a huge long history of just being an a-hole. I'll just be like, hey man, that's just what it is, just kind of shut up and deal with it. So definitely been undoing a lot of those things. And even with you, Oriana, I think there's a lot of you've come a long way in terms of I guess being more open with me, if you will, because you used to be like, hey, if you offend me or if you cut me deep, it'd be like Area 51 where like the gates go up like zoom, 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 zoom.
I am the queen of the shutdown. And that was one of the things that was modeled for me growing up in my household, is that anytime you get offended or anytime you're not sure what to say, you just shut down.
Yeah, just shut down. Just say
keeps
nothing.
Life simple. And I've learned to be able to be open with him and to feel safe enough to be like, okay, I'm going to trust him with my emotions. I'm going to trust him with my thoughts, and to not close off and kind of hide, because that was my safety mechanism.
Yeah.
Well, my wife does the same thing. Like that's her. Well, she doesn't do it now, but in our worst moments, that's her go-to thing.
Yeah.
And we actually did a podcast episode for our Phenomenal Family Inner Circle that talked about the 4 predictors of divorce. And so if you research, I think it's Mr. Gottman, I think is his name. He actually is able to predict the end of a relationship with up to 90% accuracy. Ooh, and he lists off 4. Think about that. Think about a bet where you're 90% sure on something. Like what that's basically 100% almost. So he lists 4 things that are inside of a marriage or inside of a relationship that can lead to divorce. And one of those was stonewalling. And so it's good that you're unlearning those habits, but stonewalling is one of the 4 things that he mentioned as a predictor that the relationship is headed in a negative direction and potentially about to end.
Yeah, and that's definitely my go-to thing is just shutting down. Pretty much like it'll be quick too. LaShawn will say something, and the next thing you know, I just look and I'm like, okay, in my brain, I'm like, I'm done talking.
Yep.
And then after that, and I'm done talking verbally, and he'll go and it'll keep talking. And in my brain, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not saying anything else. And I don't really hide, but eventually what used to kick in for me a lot was like, okay, I'm just gonna lie. Like it would just kick in that way. I was just like, I'm just gonna lie. And I was like, well, lying obviously keeps me out of trouble, keeps me out of like pain's way.
Yep.
So that's when we first like started dating and things. And I was a learned behavior I kind of had, like keep up appearances, and people don't need to know everything.
Yep. Tell them what they want to
so
hear.
That exactly. And you know, it minimizes the questions. So getting into a relationship with my husband, it was like, okay, I need to learn to actually tell him what's going on, what's really going on, and know that lying to him is not going to keep him safe or me safe. If anything, it's just going to create more problems in the long run. So that is definitely something I still work on, the stonewalling thing, because I have to actively fight against it. In the middle of it, I'll be like, okay, Doriana, you have to talk. So
yep. And that's when I start getting in my head and I start praying, because Lord knows when I first hit my stonewall, like if it was within these last 6 months, anytime I've been tempted to stonewall him, I automatically go into, Lord, help me to say the right thing. Help me to articulate myself in a way so I'm not going to make him mad, but at the same time, I'm going to get my point across while being graceful.
And that's so crazy because Lashad, I want to know your approach to this, because, you know, Oriana was infamous for doing that. And me, that would piss me off. You could probably
yeah, it goes back to that. It goes back to the fact that you are strong and you're going to defeat opposition. And so if the stone wall goes up, what does a warrior do when he sees a stone wall?
Bang on it.
Break that thing down.
Yep.
Like you got to fight. You got to push through. And what does a stonewaller do when you attack them or you attack their stone wall and they put up more stone walls?
Reinforcements.
Yeah, you just start reinforcing the wall.
Yeah.
But go ahead. You said your question is like, how do we deal with the stonewalling in our relationship? Was that what you were going to ask?
Yeah, because me, I've always been like, you ain't running away. Come back. Let's talk right now.
There have been times that we have literally sat in silence for hours because I was just like, I'm not saying anything.
And I would just stare at her.
You can't force me to say anything.
I would just stare at her, bro.
I'm really glad we're out of that stage of our marriage.
I'm like, where are you going? We here all night, bro.
So this is a shameless plug here. We actually have a whole course on communication that we offer our podcast listeners. And so if you're interested in that, you know, there'll be resources for that either on our podcast or in the episode notes of this one. But how to combat stonewalling, the number one technique is first you have to, we call it the 5-minute rule. And it's very simple. It doesn't have to be 5 minutes, but if someone starts violating one of your rules of engagement, some of the rules you have set for how you argue, you or your spouse is able to call a 5-minute timeout, and it's non-negotiable. Like it's non-negotiable. Everyone has to honor it. And then for 5 minutes, you just stop. You just stop talking to each other. But after the 5 minutes, you have to come back together and say, okay, we're going to talk about this, but we're going to talk about it in 5 minutes. Now, for some people, if you're going to work or you're going to bed or something like that, you can say, hey, I need to call a timeout on this argument. We're going to reconvene in 30 minutes or 45 minutes or when I get home from work. And the rule is you can't object to it. Like you cannot object to the delay. But at the same time, you must come back to the table and come back to the argument. So it's not really an exit as much as it is a pause. And I know I mentioned like rules of engagement. To take it one step back, you have to have rules for how you argue, like between you and your spouse. And you know what sets each other off. So you come up with that list of, okay, you know, no cursing in our arguments, or if it's no name calling in our arguments, or if it's not saying, for my wife, she used to say the word whatever a lot. Like when she started stonewalling, she'd be like, okay, whatever, that's what you think. And like that was like her go-to thing. And I'm like, listen, I was like, this is a logical argument here. You cannot just do the moral relativism thing on me right now. Like I am spitting facts and you're trying to say they're relative and they're not, they're objective facts. So for us, you know, we came up with that list. We came up with the list of things that we promised each other we're not going to do in an argument. And what happened is this list actually let us know when our emotions were getting out of control. And then when one of us broke one of the things on the list, we were quick to call a 5-minute timeout. And then we came back. So that's that to us, that kind of stops the stonewalling because it puts a pause there. And then it allows my wife to re-enter the conversation without me attacking her or steamrolling. It allows those Area 51 walls to come down.
Yeah.
And usually what the 5-minute timeout does too is Lashad will have a chance to understand, like, okay, I should apologize for this, or I should come back and I should probably rephrase this, because what Lashad has, he's good with words. I've never been as good. He can talk and he'll go, like he can get into like 30 minutes of a monologue.
Girl, I'm not alone. Oh my gosh, I'm the same way. I'm horrible with words. I'm just like, I'm not quick with them. They don't.
Yeah, no, I'm really not. Yeah, then you probably know Oriana, but he can go. Lashad can dive into like exegesis about his argument. Like it's interesting to watch, you know. But at the same time,
I'm quick to discern
it'll be like a complete sermon with 4 points and 3 subpoints each about how he's right and yada da, all that other stuff. And me, I'll be quiet for like a half hour, and then he's just digging a hole and going, and I'm quiet for 2 more seconds, and he's like, okay, this must mean that I have more freedom to speak. So most of the time, it's usually when I do come out of the stone wall and I say something, he'll be like, oh, you're mad. Okay. He'll be like, okay, 5 minutes. So at 5 minutes, and then at that time and usually that either gives me a chance to be like, okay, I need to apologize for not speaking because I realized what I've just been doing for the last 30 minutes, or he might realize something that he said that probably made me upset. And so we have a chance to apologize. It's hard to be mad at people that you apologize to. Another thing that I kind of do sometimes when he's arguing with me is I'll look him in his face and I'll be like, you love me. And he can't say no.
I'm going to do that. Thank you.
And like a couple times, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I do." And it's just the idea of like, okay, let's work through this.
Try it. If you try it,
thank you for that. I am using that.
It'll blow that whole argument up. Like you're 10 steps closer to about kissing and having sex or whatever it is y'all do. Like just look them right in the eye and be like, "You love me and you like me." Don't act like that. Quit acting like that. Why are you yelling at me like you don't love me? You better stop. All this aggression I feel right now.
It works. I was like, let's redirect that aggression into something productive.
Yeah, no, I mean it works because I'm like, you love me, and he'll laugh and be like, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, okay, let's get through the disagreement so we can get back to our relationship, because that's all it is. Yep. It's a little hump that is either something we said to each other that made each other mad, a misunderstanding that we have, whatever. But at the end of the day, I chose this man, he chose me, and that's how it's going to be for a really, 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 really long time. So it's kind of like let's just get through what we need to get through, because at the end of the day, I tell him all the time, I'm like, man, I like you a lot better than most of anybody else that I hang out with. And like when the longer I'm away from him, the more I realize I like you better than everybody else.
Well, on that note, I ain't got nothing else to say. Mic drop. There we go. I'm not going to drop this mic because it was expensive. But yeah, John, go ahead and close this out. Do you guys have anything else?
No, it's been an honor to be here. We got to do this again. I feel like, just throwing that out.
Oh yeah.
Is it okay to invite yourself back onto somebody else's podcast?
Yes.
Yes, bro. Yes.
Do that, please. I am cool with it.
Yeah, man. I mean, we need more people. People like us. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
We in here.
Close the podcast.
We here, bro. Word, but yeah, I'm gonna get us closed out, y'all. We appreciate y'all so much. Seriously, man. If you're listening, give it up for our guests. Give it a digital round of applause for our guests. They've been awesome, and we want to thank everybody for listening to Ree. So, yeah, don't forget to hit up the show notes, to connect with us on social media everywhere. And if you like what we do, subscribe to our Patreon for $1 a month. We'll see y'all next time, bro.
See you next time. Thank you for having us.
Yes, sir.
Wow, that was awesome. Now, we promised you we were going to give you a few tips that would fortify the future of your marriage, and I think we did just that. Listen, I really hope you enjoyed our time together. We have another episode coming to you very shortly. Again, if you want to connect with us even more, click the link in the description. It'll take you to our storefront where we can dive a little deeper together. We have some free content on there. We have some content that is that you can pay for, that you can invest in, that will really move your marriage to the next level. We love you guys, and we will see you later.